episode 24. We are in
My
year 2 of quarantine. What have you been up to this week, man? I haven't talked to you all week.
Yeah. Same old, same old. Finally got my roof on. So I'm taking a very well-earned break.
Had a little bit of back and forth about this. This is the big news of the week. We may have a disagreement here, I'm not sure, but this,
Okay.
of course, is the AOC dress controversy that's gripped the nation,
Riveting stuff.
divided the left, and united the right, obviously. This was the funniest one and the most accurate one, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It is exactly what it looks like.
Her tax the rich writing is somewhat, I mean, they tried to say it's the same font, but it's not the same font.
It's definitely not the same font.
Chick-fil-A is like cursive.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, it's all right. So you know the Chick-fil-A billboards where it says "Eat more chicken."
Yeah. But
That's the font. Certainly not the same.
well, it's a different color for one.
Yeah. Okay.
And shout out to BuzzFeed for getting her bent over in this dress. Holy cow, guys! Good job, guys. Real
Yeah.
mature.
Okay. I'm gonna go out on a limb. Probably get called a sexist, but that right there is the reason that we know AOC's name. That's the reason that she's in the news.
Why? Because she's fine.
I think her politics has certainly something to do with her being the boogeyman of the left, but the fact that she's so photogenic is the reason that everybody
It's
talks
helpful.
about her.
It's definitely helpful. But
It
she
is.
ran against it. I believe she ran against an incumbent Democrat. That's what the crew. That's what their sort of thing has been.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Ilhan Omar. She's in the news also all the time for the same sort of reason. They get attacked by people like Tucker Carlson because they're women. They represent, progressive policies.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah,
criticisms you could make of AOC for sure. I mean, she does take some corporate money, although nothing like most people do because she doesn't.
Yeah. Well, there was the force the vote issue with Jimmy Dore, where she was kind of getting attacked for not being a strong enough advocate for certain. But these are
attack
all
by Jimmy Dore is like
yes.
that's a badge
the
of
problem
pride.
with Jimmy Dore. The problem with Jimmy Dore is that he's Jimmy Dore.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
What do you think about this?
Well, I don't know. So actually, Russell Brand, I think, had the best take on this. Been listening to him a little bit lately. He's interesting. I don't know her motives. I think it initially it comes off as being a little class traitorish. Like, why are you going to the Met Gala to begin with? What happens there that you need to go? And it's a $30,000 plate thing. It's just for a bunch of rich people to get together and hobnob with one another. But she's young. She had an opportunity to do something most people never do. I don't know her intentions. I don't know her mind. So I hate to lay judgment on her, but it feels tacky to me.
Did you read her statement about it or anything?
I'd listened to it. What was it that she said?
Well, she didn't.
Specifically.
She didn't like pay $30,000 to go. She was invited.
She got an invite. It was free for her.
And this woman that made this dress is like some sort of activist.
Yeah.
And I can't remember exactly everything that she said, but I think it's pretty baller, dude. She shows up to the Met Gala in a tax the rich dress. That's pretty baller, dude.
I think everybody there had a good chuckle and laugh about it, and probably commented her because they all would think of themselves as lefty.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, I think
in my opinion,
you get in these Hollywood circles, these uber rich circles. I think they're just going to laugh about it and probably think it's cute. And,
I think I think she can convince some young 20-something rich kids to tax the rich. I think she can popularize the movement in some way.
I think it's much more likely she'd convince a 20-something rich kid to invite her back to the Met Gala than to actually give up some money. This is more on the I don't know. I don't know her. I don't know what she was doing there.
Well, I don't think her intentions matter. I think what matters is the outcome here.
Sure. What? So that's two different things. What is the outcome of her doing something like that? And what do I think she was trying to do? And I'm kind of answering what was her intention going into it? What did she think that she was trying to do? I think she just saw an opportunity to do something interesting and took it. And I may or may not have done the same thing in that situation. I think she's probably just more than likely just going to be the butt of a bunch of jokes on Facebook for a week or so. I think that's the actual outcome of it. Hey, if something, if by her fitting into that dress, if it convinces some trust fund kid that was there to give away all his money to labor rights causes, then awesome.
Well, that's not how it works. Things change slowly over time, and
sure,
she's popularizing the progressive policies.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if
there's no such thing as bad publicity. Isn't that the same?
I'm being a curmudgeon, and I'm looking at that, and I'm so somebody that's not aware of progressive policies, and they see some beautiful young woman at this uber wealthy affair wearing probably a dress that if you bought something else from that those dresses are not cheap, is what I'm saying.
This was given to her by this woman. This is the dressmaker right here.
I'm not saying she paid for it, but still the image of it, when you look at something like that, if you look at somebody wearing one of those type of dresses at one of those kind of things, it's just an expression of wealth. Whether she paid it or not, I know she didn't. I know she was. You
think this dress was expensive to make? Look at this fucking dress, dude.
No, it's not expensive to make, but this is that art crap where they.
Oh yeah, it's a bunch of rich assholes. But this is sort of a protest action, isn't it? Wouldn't this be considered sort of a protest action? It's not like she went there to hobnob with the rich fucks. She literally said, "Tax the rich."
Okay, I don't know. I don't know if it was protest action or
AOC's
or
legit.
Go.
She, like I said before, she comes from a working class background. She's not the type of person to sort of. She's not one of these corporate Democrats who pretends to stand up for working people. She literally was a bartender before she became a congresswoman.
Yeah, not yet.
Well, I mean.
Yeah, I think I posted something on Reddit. It felt very Hunger Games-y.
I didn't get the reference. I haven't seen the...
In the Hunger Games, Katniss Everdeen come from a very poor family, and then she ended up becoming, the most sought-after wealthy because she was original. She was legit. She actually knew the struggle, and the people from the Capitol, that had grown up in opulence.
There's some truth to that for sure.
She was a novelty because she was, had the bona fides.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you are interested in nootropics, check out my website. Our line of cutting-edge products is available at our lowest prices in the industry, now with free shipping through the fall.
Shire Hemp Farms, your number one source for Delta 8 CBD and smokable CBD products. Currently running a sale on the 1 mil Delta 8 carts, and I have seen a significant increase in sales since we started this, so do not miss out. This will not last forever. And for you listeners out there, ES Pod will get you an additional 20% off. Oh my God, that's insane. Check us out, shirehempfarms.com today.
Thank you to everyone who is listening to the show and watching the show. Please subscribe to us on our YouTube channels, follow us on Reddit, subscribe to us on Rumble. Leave your comments in the description, and we will answer them as soon as we possibly can. Head over to homepage. The link will be in the description. You can follow my Twitter account, follow Tony's Facebook page. You can follow us everywhere. Stitcher, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and so on. Thank you guys very much, and we'll get right back to it here.
Excuse me. I kept getting redirected to Jordan Peterson videos.
I'm glad you brought that up, because this is a phenomenon that not only I have noticed, but other people have noticed as well, apparently. Let's play the lead and we'll get into it.
All right.
Fucked up kids from drinking all of models. Houses that diss me, but now I'll be fucking models. Deadly ways now, life is a fiction. Give a fuck about this shit.
Into the Chipper. Jordan Peterson this week. Into the Chipper with Jordan Peterson.
Oh my goodness, not Jordan Peterson.
I know. Your fake dad is going to get the hammer.
Yeah. Man, well, it had to have been sometime. I was telling you, it's kind of interesting. I've been I listen to YouTube while I'm working all week, and for some reason, I'd listen to like a video or two, and then all of a sudden I would auto play into some Jordan Peterson interview, just all sorts of this Jordan Peterson stuff, and I was kind of assaulted by it all week, and I just thought it was really odd. 'Cause, like, I've listened to things of his in the past, but it's not something I've ever. I mean, I have sought it out, but it's not something I didn't understand why. I've been assaulted by him.
It's
like
not
that,
something that should be showing up in your suggested
as often as it has.
Right.
Like 2 or 3 times a day, I autoplay into a 2-hour podcast with Jordan Peterson.
This is a phenomenon that I've been noticing for a couple of years now, for a long time, and other people have noticed it too. I've had several conversations with people online that have had the same thing happen. Like if you go to r/YouTube or something like that, you can find it in there. And it's not just Jordan Peterson. There's some other sort of these right-wing entry-level neocons also, but it seems like Peterson is the biggest one.
He's got I think he has a kind of a different appeal to people than somebody like a Ben Shapiro would, or some of these other kind of traditional conservatives. I don't know. I think I would probably tick a lot of the boxes that most Jordan Peterson fans would also tick. So I could see how maybe the algorithm would think that I would be into that, but
well, it shows you what you're watching currently, and it's not like you currently are watching him to where he should show up on your suggested, right?
Yeah, I haven't sought out anything Peterson in probably a year since I actually looked for something.
It's almost like they're pushing these certain people through the algorithm. Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems pretty obvious. Let's get into Peterson a little bit, his history, where he started, how he got famous.
Bill C-16 purported to do nothing but extend human rights provisions to an excluded group, let's say, to the transgender and non-gender binary types, and that was the federal legislation. It also made it a hate crime to discriminate or harass, essentially. So now then the question is, well, what exactly do you mean by discriminate or harass? And why exactly is that a hate crime under the criminal code? Well, there was an answer to that. The answer was, well, this bill will be interpreted in light of the policies generated by the Ontario Human Rights Commission, very large set of policies. Now, the Ontario Human Rights Commission is a radically leftist organization. I think it's the most dangerous organization in Canada, although you could debate that. And they set all sorts of policies about how this legislation was going to be interpreted, and the federal government linked to their website to state that Bill C-16 would be interpreted in light of those guidelines. So I went and read all the policies. Well, one of the policies was that if you didn't use the preferred pronouns of a given group, that you could be charged essentially with a hate crime. And I thought, no,
which given group is that? You're talking about transgender people.
Yeah, and so there's all these pronouns that have come up. There's 70 different sets of pronouns approximately to hypothetically describe people who don't fit anywhere on the gender spectrum, which is also something that I don't really understand. I don't understand that conceptually.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah. We'll come to that. But
yeah,
I just
but
want to
the
hear
point
the story
is,
of this bill first.
Okay, so now a person is compelled under Canadian law to use the pronoun of another individual's choice on pain of law. And I thought, well, no, that's not acceptable. It's one thing to put limits on what a person can't say, like say with hate speech laws, which I also don't agree with, by the way, but that's a different argument. I think it's a narrower argument. But to compel me to use a certain content when I'm formulating my thoughts or my actions under threat of legislative action, I thought, no, what's happened there is the government has introduced compelled speech legislation into the private sphere. It's never happened in the history of English common law. And so I said, there's no way I'm abiding by that. I don't.
This is what made him famous. He released a series of videos about C-16, this law in Canada. C-16 added gender expression and gender identity as protected classes. So in the United States, we have protected classes like black people that are protected under law. You can't discriminate against those protected classes, and they added those to the Canadian law. Peterson criticized the bill, saying it would compel speech. Peterson argued that the law would classify the failure to use preferred pronouns of transgender people as hate speech. According to legal experts, however, including law professors Brenda Crossman of the University of Toronto and Kyle Kirkup of the University of Ottawa, not using preferred pronouns would not meet legal standards for hate speech. In my opinion, he was sort of appealing to people who find this stuff kind of silly, like the gender pronouns, which most people do.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was actually kind of looking this up again just a bit ago before the podcast started, and it is a lot. It seems to be a lot more slippery than than it should. Like, it doesn't criminalize misgendering somebody, but using an incorrect pronoun apparently intentionally, like after you've been told not to, could be considered hate speech.
And you don't think it is?
No, it's certainly.
Peterson doesn't even believe in hate speech. Apparently, he thinks you should be able to say whatever you want. I guess, but I'm not going to make that argument here because he's not here to defend himself against that.
Well, I think. I don't know. I would have to get a good definition for hate speech. I know it's certainly speech that people of a class that should be protected wouldn't like. But criminalizing that, I think, is I don't know. It's a very slippery slope, and it's kind of a scary path to go down. I would, if my understanding and if Jordan's understanding of the bill is correct, that at a certain point, misgendering or mispronouncing or dead naming people could be criminalized. And I'm totally on board with Jordan that no, you can't do that. I understand people don't like it, but that's a social issue.
So you're saying
because legal system.
Because this is a gradient, because this is not a black or white issue, we should just throw the whole thing down the toilet?
No, it's a plain free speech issue for me. It's
but speech, you can't say whatever you want, right?
You should be very close. And when you start moving in the way towards criminalizing speech, just criminalizing, essentially what you're doing, you're criminalizing being an asshole. If I go out and call somebody the N-word in a public street, that makes me an asshole. It doesn't make me a criminal.
Right. Well, it depends the situation, right? That can be hate speech in the United States.
It can, and
depends on the severity of the situation.
I don't know what the situation would be.
Well, it depends on the situation. That's up to the judge to decide that, right? That's how the law works.
Yeah,
law is always an interpretation.
And we want to keep as much power out of the judge's hand to be deciding these things as possible, and certainly err as often as possible on the side of let people say what they're going to say, and they can face the social consequences of saying that or not.
Well, I'm not sure exactly the dynamic in Canada, but obviously in the United States, that's sort of what we do. We have the First Amendment to protect speech.
Yes, and in Canada they don't.
It's a very high bar to pass into the realm of hate speech. People aren't getting prosecuted for saying the N-word. Whether or not you think they should, they're for the most part not. These laws are to protect against discrimination, which is the cake thing again. You can't refuse to bake a cake for a gay couple simply because they're gay, because gays are a protected class. And C-16 was adding trans people to the list of protected classes. And the same sort of legal system in Canada applies. I presume that they don't have the First Amendment, but they have sort of free speech. I mean,
I don't think they have it. They don't have it codified as a human right guaranteed to all in the same way that they do here in the U.S. Now, obviously, I don't know hardly anything about Canadian law. This is my understanding of what's going on. And I think that myself and my understanding Jordan would have no issue with all those other things, the cake issue and having them be treated fairly under the law. I think that's a non-issue. Nobody's really worried about that. It's simply the criminalizing of certain speech and behavior.
Well, sure.
When it's left open to interpretation like that.
But the lawyers weren't saying that it was going to be criminalized the way Jordan Peterson was saying it was. Jordan Peterson was saying that. That's why he got so popular.
Yeah. So he probably had I think he was, I think he was worrying about the worst case scenario that could happen under the law. Now, I'm sure that's going to be it's not going to be the norm for the law to be interpreted in the way that Jordan was worrying about, but it's certainly a legitimate concern. I would say that I don't want it to be. I would not want to be opened up to the possibility of having bureaucrats decide that you can be put to prison because you use certain language.
Sure,
and it's a very scary path to go down.
I think you have an argument there that maybe he was coming from that direction initially, but I think it's going to be hard to defend him throughout his career here. in terms of his virtue. He didn't really make it. Make it a secret what he was out to do here.
I will be Jordan's chastity belt defending his virtue. This is what I'm here to do.
I figured out how to monetize social justice warriors.
This is exactly what he did. He got a huge following off of this C-16, and he rode with it the whole way, man.
Capitalism, baby.
Look at this evil grin, dude. God.
Yeah.
He found a niche, didn't he? And he blew up.
He did.
It's huge.
Yeah,
He's being recommended in people's feeds for no reason, apparently. He figured out a way to monetize social justice warriors. So to rephrase that, he's profiting off of a reaction to progressive social movements. Therefore, he is literally a reactionary, and he appeals to reactionaries. And he does this in several ways. He has these keywords he uses. Cultural Marxism is the most egregious one to me because it's complete nonsense. This was a term popularized in the United States by the Tea Party. It was also popularized by right-wing terrorist and mass murderer Anders Breivik, and is also used by Peterson a lot. And where does it come from? Cultural Marxism comes from the term cultural Bolshevism. Cultural Bolshevism was a term used by the Nazis. Cultural Bolshevism. It was in Germany that anti-Semitic thought was to become most elaborate. The Nazi movement was attracted to anti-Semitism for the same reasons as in other European countries. It provided an alternate explanation for the problems of banking collapse, unemployment, war, and class strife to those offered by increasingly popular anti-capitalist interpretations. It did this quite simply by displacing the social and economic functions of bankers, capitalists, war profiteers, and politicians for Jewish conspiracies. But the Nazi regime in power came to blame every social problem or ideological conflict in society on Jewish influence. They believed Western society was being eroded from within by attacks on its culture. The Nazis launched campaigns against degenerate art, quote-unquote, prescribed forms of modern music, and famously engaged in the mass burning of subversive books. Whole neighborhoods deemed cosmopolitan or bohemian were scheduled for demolition, as the Third Reich planned to return the German people to a rural lifestyle. Jewish influence was condemned for undermining family values and promoting the idea of women's equality and the LGBT community. The Nazis claimed they faced an insidious assault on the things that really matter: family, identity, music, art, and intellectual life. They called this attack Kulturbolschewismus, or cultural Bolshevism, the Bolsheviks being the Marxist revolutionary movement in Russia. This is because, for the Nazis, Marxism and Judaism were synonymous.
Yeah, it's kind of a way to attack a group without power and blame them for having all the cultural power, which is just kind of like this amorphous thing that
it's smart to instead of just going after the economic policies of the Marxists in Germany, they decided to blame another group, an outside group that a lot of working class people had issues with, right? Just due to their inherent racism.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to that. It's just it's so poorly defined too that you can attach it to anything. Right. It's the kind of the boogeyman for everything. You know, what's gender pronouns? We don't like that. Well, it's cultural Marxism. I know with Jordan Peterson, you know, the rising or falling levels of religiosity. Well, that's because of cultural Marxism. You know,
cultural Marxism, neo-postmodernist cultural Marxism.
I wish I could do a good Peterson impression.
Jordan Peterson has had a few debates. Normally he ducks debates with like prominent lefties, but he took a debate with Zizek because Zizek has a strong accent, and he has a sort of particular way of speaking. I think Jordan thought he could handle him. Here's a little bit of it. This is Peterson versus Zizek on capitalism versus Marxism. And Zizek calls him out on his BS about cultural Marxism. Because cultural Marxism isn't a thing, right? It doesn't mean it doesn't make any sense.
It's a term that only exists.
Marxism is a critique of capitalism. It has nothing to do with like whatever like wokeism, whatever Peterson is talking about.
Yeah, I'd listened to this debate some time ago, and it's really fantastic.
I'm not the biggest Zizek fan, but
I really enjoyed the debate. I'd never heard of this fellow before
there's
this.
not too many that Peterson really has with anybody that's.
You designate your, under quotation marks, I'm not characterizing here, enemy, or what you are fighting against, as sometimes you call it
Zizek's got that BDE.
Postmodern neo-Marxism. I know
he says like he's got the biggest dick in the room.
Oh, he does, dude.
Just look at him. He ain't got a care in the world.
He doesn't play around, dude.
He's going to educate
political correctness,
Jordan.
these excesses of whatever spirit of envy and so on and so on. Do you think they are really, where did you find this data? I don't know them. I would ask you here, give me some names or whatever. Where are the Marxists here? I don't know any. Who is the Marxist here? Show me any big names of political correctness. I think they fear like a good vampire fears garlic. This is why they are already, the one who is not a Marxist, but at least approaches economic topic, Bernie Sanders, he is already under attack as white male and all that stuff and so on. My problem would be this one. What you describe as postmodern neo-Marxism, where is really the Marxist element in it? They are for equality. Sorry, where? They are for equality at these cultural struggles, proper names, how do we call each other? Do you see in them, in political correctness and so on, any genuine will to change society? I don't see it. I think it's a hyper-moralization, which is a silent admission of a defeat.
Pretty well said there from Zizek.
Yeah.
Pointing out the fact that even Bernie Sanders was he was attacked for his not being woke enough, right? By the postmodern neo-Marxists, supposedly. And Zizek's like, show me these Marxists in popular culture that are promoting this wokeism. Because the thing about Zizek is he rails against the political correctness too, quite a bit if you listen to him.
Yeah, I think they're just two completely separate things. There's the group of I guess nominally leftists that are worried about the social issues and political correctness, and they tend to, from what I've seen, they tend to not really care that much about the social issues,
right,
or the political and economic issues that someone like you or I probably are a lot more concerned with. And it's almost misleading to even characterize them as being in the same group. And I think this kind of is the fundamental issue with a lot of my issues with Jordan Peterson is he likes to play connect the dots. Well, this group that's doing all this political correctness crap that probably most people would agree with, they would nominally agree with this, which is kind of the same as this group, which is also something that was similar to what the communists in the Soviet Union were advocating for. Therefore, advocating for this policy today is the same as what Stalin was doing in the gulags.
Wokeness equals Stalinism or something.
And he really does. That people attack religion. Okay, well, Stalin attacked religion and burned down some churches. So by saying we should keep religion out of schools, basically you're advocating for gulags. You're advocating to put people in gulags and work camps. And I read in Solzhenitsyn from the Gulag Archipelago, and this is what they were doing. This is what they were putting people in the gulags. Yeah.
He got pretty exposed in this one because apparently he didn't read anything except the Communist Manifesto, and he came in here to debate fucking Zizek.
Yeah. The Bolsheviks were worried about cultural issues, and so now, yeah.
Well, you remember Bernie Sanders, a lot of people accused the wokers or whatever you want to, I don't even know what you call that group, but
I think
political correctness advocates, maybe?
I feel like that group mostly consists of writers for shitty little online newspapers that are just trying to get clicks.
Something
for the
like
most
that,
part.
yeah.
It's something like that. It's such a small portion of the population, and but
loud vocal minority, right?
A very loud, very vocal minority, most of whom are just trying to get clicks for their articles.
Let's move into hierarchies, another one of Peterson's buzzwords that he talks at length about here. The reason I wanted to talk about Peterson, because I've had a couple people like saying, hey, I'm reading the 12 steps of whatever Peterson's book is called. Is it 12? It's not 12 steps, is it?
12 Rules for Life.
12 Rules for Life, there you go.
Yeah.
And people are like congratulating him and all this type of stuff for reading Peterson. It's like the self-help stuff is fine, but he also mixes in the political stuff with it, and he doesn't distinguish between the two. That's the problem, man. He gets a lot of young people into the alt-right with this self-help stuff that maybe they need, but it's like you have to separate the two. And as a psychologist, Peterson should really know that and be aware of it.
I wonder. The way he mixes those things together, I mean, it's the same way that he, like I was just saying, that he conflates this part of the left with that part of the left. If you're in favor of healthcare, then you must be in favor of Ceausescu.
Why hierarchies are necessary.
One thing that I've been doing in my tour repeatedly, when I talk about the first chapter of my book, which is Stand Up Straight with Your Shoulders Back, it's a discussion of hierarchies and their eternal nature, right? Because my claim is, and it's not my claim, I think it's mere fact, that organisms that have to cooperate and compete with other organisms of their type inevitably arrange themselves into hierarchies, and that's been going on for so long, which is at least 300 million years, that our nervous systems have adapted to hierarchies as if they're a permanent element of being, right? More permanent than trees, like seriously permanent. The most fundamental neurochemical, the one that regulates the entire brain, serotonin, is acutely sensitive to hierarchical distinctions. And so that's part of the proposition. So the reason I laid that proposition forward was to say, whatever pitfalls hierarchies might produce, you cannot lay them at the feet of the West, patriarchy, or capitalism.
You can't. You cannot blame capitalism or patriarchy for hierarchies because it's so ingrained so deeply into our genetics, Tony. Therefore, there is no point even trying to address any of the excesses of capitalism or the patriarchy or any hierarchy. They're immutable.
Yeah. I mean, this is going to be the recurring theme of this episode, is the hand waving and just, well, they're all kind of part of the same thing when they're obviously they're not. And so I mean, if you want to talk about certain social hierarchies, and if you get any small group of people together, there's going to be one person that's going to be more dominant. It's going to be more vocal. It's going to be more extroverted, and they're going to be more communicative with people. Yeah. And that's going to arrange itself hierarchically into social groups. They're going to be the ones that talks more and maybe brings people together. They're going to talk with outside groups. There's going to be a certain person who performs certain tasks that gets him other mates. These social hierarchies, obviously that happens. Obviously those occur. But then, when you do the hand waving and say, so the hierarchies of capitalism, of this person's accumulating all this wealth and power. Well, it doesn't have anything to do with capitalism. This was going to naturally happen anyways. That's right. That's where I would have my issue.
Don't worry about the hierarchies.
Bezos and Musk are just alpha males, and this would have happened anyways. It just happens to be that they're living in a society where they can accumulate billions.
See, Columbus, when he came to Hispaniola, he arranged himself naturally into a hierarchy with the native population. Which we'll get into that later.
Yeah, he did arrange that.
He arranged. It was natural.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a non-starter. You're wrong. And not just a little bit wrong. You're so seriously wrong that if you insist upon doing that, you won't even achieve your own aims. Because you're actually not grappling with the problem. The problem is, if hierarchies are a problem, which they are, the problem is way more serious than mere capitalism. It's way deeper. And if you're actually interested in rectifying the the negative consequences of hierarchies, then you're going to have to get a lot more sophisticated than your idiot Marxism.
We're waiting.
So part of the elaboration of that argument is, well, hierarchies are inevitable because we have to solve complex problems and we have to solve them socially. And when you implement a solution to a complex problem socially, you produce a hierarchy because some people are better at the implementation than others. So there's a hierarchy of competence, and then there's a hierarchy of distribution of the spoils. And in both of those hierarchies, you get a disproportionate clumping of resources at the top and dispossession at the bottom. It's in the nature of hierarchies. So what's the left for? The left is to remind those who are benefiting from the hierarchies that the hierarchy comes at a cost. And the cost is the clumping of people at the bottom.
Listen, Bezos. I'd like to remind you.
Hey, I've got no problem with that analysis. I've got no problem with that system. There are going to be certain people that are going to work harder and they're going to accumulate more goods as a result of their harder work. And I've got no problem with the idea that the left is concerned. But, the issue comes with it's not that this guy worked 20% harder, therefore he has 20% more stuff, or even 50% more stuff for his 20% extra work. We're
not supposed to do anything. We're just supposed to remind him about it. We're not supposed to take any action or vote anybody in, or The left is to remind those with at the top of the hierarchy that the hierarchy exists. I mean, I think they know that.
Oh, I'm sure they're well aware. I'm sure of that.
And that's an eternal cost, and it's not trivial. And so that's what the left should be properly focused on. The left should be providing the voice of those who are dispossessed by hierarchies. And the right should be saying, yeah, but the damn hierarchies are necessary. And they're not only necessary, but they're also productive. Then the left says, yes, but they tilt towards tyranny, and they can be occupied inappropriately by people who are playing games of power. Fair enough, the right has to take that into account. The hierarchy can rigidify and is likely to do that, and it can be taken over by people who are corrupt, and that's likely to happen. And so, but it's okay because the dialogue can work out. The right can say, well, yeah, we need the damn hierarchies and they need to be buttressed, and the left can say, yes, but they have to be maintained properly so they don't deteriorate and degenerate.
What is he talking?
I've got no problem with any of that.
He just said that the hierarchy will rigidify. That means it will become more hierarchical over time. The powerful bring more power upon themselves over time. What is the left reminding going to do?
Well, my understanding of what he was saying is you have this constant balancing act. You have people on the right that say, hey, these hierarchies are natural and they serve a purpose. And the left is to just keep things from getting out of control. And I kind of see that as probably most economic systems in the world right now. You have two factions that kind of go back and forth, and hopefully you find a good balance between the two.
You could interpret that in a certain way that doesn't sound horrible. Sure, I grant you.
And that's
the people the people he's appealing to. This is a sort of a blatant dog whistle, right? He's appealing to the alt-right here. He's talking about hierarchies and justifying hierarchies. Black people are dumb and poor because of the natural hierarchy. They should try harder.
Okay. Maybe you're listening to stuff I haven't listened to, but I guess it could be interpreted through that lens. That was not how I was reading it at all. So,
how are you reading? What hierarchies do you think he's referencing?
I think he talks a lot about social hierarchy. So he talks a lot from like the evolutionary perspective of primates and the hierarchies that are developed in their different social groups. This one goes out and finds the food and gets certain spoils from it. This one benefits the community more and gets more mates as a result.
So you're saying between does that apply between societies?
I think it's applicable on all sorts of different levels. So it would also be applicable on the level that you're talking about, between racial disparities, but it's not. I don't think he's exclusively and necessarily talking about that. I mean, these hierarchies exist everywhere. I'm thinking
he's generalizing, right? He's giving arguments to people who will use them as they will, right?
I mean, yeah, sure. Yeah, you could use them as they will, but I'm mostly concerned for judging Peterson on what he's intending. What are the arguments he's making? Is he making an argument for people to go out there and make excuses for policies that disenfranchise Black people, or is he just speaking as an evolutionary psychologist and talking about how these differences between individuals occur in nature?
Is it your assertion that he has no responsibility for the result of his statements?
Sure, you always have responsibility for the result of the statements that you make, but I think it would be a stretch to say that that's what he's saying specifically. I mean,
okay, well, we'll continue down this road and we'll see where we get to.
Hang on. I'm happy to be proven wrong.
Next up, IQ.
A real problem. One way to not do very well in any hierarchy is to have a low IQ. And so IQ is normally distributed. And if you have an IQ of less than 85, it's hard for you to read well enough to follow instructions. That's about 10% of the population, might even be higher than that. Okay, so given that lack, how are you going to compete? And the answer is, you're not. Because low IQ is a good predictor of poverty. Now they spiral because, if you're less cognitively gifted, then, and you have children, they're going to be in a less enriched environment. These things spiral, but you still have the essential problem. That's the essential problem of the dispossessed. It's like hierarchies are complex tools to attain necessary goals, but they dispossess people. What do we do with the people that they dispossess? The answer is, we don't know.
We don't know. There's nothing we can do about it. We don't know how to fix it. It is what it is.
So I did not hear that at all. He was just making a statement of fact. This is what is going to happen. This is
right. It's inevitable.
Yeah, people that are. I mean, first off,
some people are just smarter than others.
IQ. Are people just smarter than others? Is IQ a real thing?
It's related to sociocultural issues. So he tries to say that poverty is related to IQ in the way that poor people are dumb because they're dumb. But in reality, IQ is correlated to education, which is why there's the Flynn effect.
I mean, there's IQ's correlated to a lot of things. Correlation is not causation, as we've talked about.
It's primarily correlated to education. It goes up over time.
Sure, IQ also has correlations to wealth, family wealth. IQ also has correlations to.
This is well studied.
Sure, of course.
Because IQ isn't your intelligence; it's like what you know, right? It's how much you've learned.
Yeah, it's also like reasoning too. I don't know if you ever taken one of the IQ. Yeah, so it's what you know along with your reasoning ability, which is, of course, you're going to increase your reasoning ability through education, obviously. Pointing out that disparity exists, I don't think is advocating for keeping the disparity or just and pointing out that it's a difficult issue to solve. I don't think is. Well,
he didn't say it's difficult. He said we don't know. There's a lot
we
of people
don't know
with
how to.
Pretty good answers. I mean, you could, for example,
there's
have
good
welfare
suggestions
programs to raise up the lowest quintile, right?
Sure. That's one way to help. I mean, it's not an absolute solution. I mean, there are countries that have these welfare programs that still have disparities in IQ and differences in the amount of wealth that they accumulate over time. It's not an easy solution. I think that's how I was reading what he was saying. And so pointing out these disparities is not encouraging them or saying that they're not easy solutions. They're not apparent solutions. It's not saying that there are no solutions, so we shouldn't try anything.
He didn't say that. He said we don't know. He didn't say these are difficult. He did say these are difficult problems. I'll grant you.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's clearly referencing Charles Murray's work here with this talk of IQ and hierarchies. What else could he possibly mean? What else could he be referencing?
He could be referencing his work as an evolutionary psychologist. I mean, this is what they study in primate groups all the time. They study it in human group. I mean, we're obviously a primate group, but I mean, this is. I would assume this is kind of right up the alley of what a evolutionary psychologist would study. Obviously, I'm familiar with Charles Murray's work.
What type of hierarchies would he be referencing then?
I think he's talking about all different hierarchies. Hierarchies in IQ, hierarchies in mate selection, hierarchies in wealth,
IQ isn't a hierarchy. IQ is just a differentiation among people.
It is
hierarchy is one person above another in power level.
So, but IQ is correlated with your position in a hierarchy. If you are smart, if you have a hierarchy,
he's implying that smart people should be in power.
I don't think he's implying that. I think he's pointing out that oftentimes smarter people end up having more wealth and power. It's not it's an is, not an ought statement.
Well, I'll give you my take. My take is this is a clear dog whistle. People who benefit from hierarchies always suggest that the hierarchy is due to their merit. It's not due to any misappropriation of wealth over time or colonialism or any theft of that sort. This is always the case. Everyone who's in power says that hierarchies are inevitable. They're a part of life. They are this way because, for example, in ancient Europe, it was the divine right of kings. God gave us this power. This hierarchy is immutable, and it just goes down the line from there.
In every human society, everywhere in the world, there have been hierarchies.
That's definitely not
religious
true.
Hierarchies. Yeah.
No, it's not true at all. There were Native American tribes that were completely democratic. There was the Paris Commune, the Spanish Revolution of 1936. There were the cabooses.
Okay, yeah. So you are, first off, the Spanish Commune, there were certainly leaders amongst Catalonia. There were certainly leaders in that group. Now, there weren't any obvious political hierarchies. That did not mean that other hierarchies didn't exist in that group. There were smarter people in that group. There were dumber people. There were people that were the leader of these factions.
That's what Peterson's talking about? Do you think that's what he's talking about?
Yeah, I think that he's just generally talking about.
It just so happens that thousands and thousands of young alt-righters use these arguments to support Nazism. It's just a coincidence.
I don't know that they are. I don't know that they are. I don't know. I don't know. I can say that he studies this branch of science. This is what this branch of science has to deal with. He's just pointing out simple observations that these things develop in amongst any group. It's obvious. He talks about the association he makes with the lobster groups. Even in lobster societies, they develop certain hierarchies around mate selection. I'm not going to start
attributing to him.
These nefarious ends to what he's saying when if it's not readily apparent. Like,
so you don't want to.
You're having to read into that. You're having to read that into what he's saying.
Intentionality to him, basically. He just stands on his own.
Yeah, I'm going to attribute to him what he said. I'm going to take it that he's a man of his word, unless I see otherwise, and I'm going to take him at face value. This is what he's talking about. Okay, that's what you mean.
All right. Let's move on to the straw men of Jordan Peterson, because this is one of his main shticks, right? He makes these straw men and then goes after them.
Yes, he does.
There is no difference between men and women. Obviously, everyone on the left always says this. All the postmodern neo-Marxists always say this. There's no difference between men and women. Even though I've heard literally every trans woman ever say that this is not what they say, but this is always attributed to them. And this is exactly the same argument that Shapiro uses anytime he discusses any trans issues. He says, people on the left always say there's no difference between men and women. I beg to differ.
Do you think a trans woman is a woman?
No.
Why not?
Because I think that women are capable, generally speaking, of having babies, and they have female genitalia, and they have an XX chromosome, and I think the biological markers are relevant. It doesn't necessarily mean that I don't think that people should be treated with respect and dignity if they happen not to fit easily into a gender category. That's a different issue.
Right.
But it's a matter of definition. And I actually think it's a foolish argument in some sense. Because what do you mean by real?
Well, I mean, you've just clarified that, though. You don't think that a trans woman is a woman. And do you think that is what is behind or explains your opposition to this idea of a law mandating you to use a preferred pronoun, is because you don't actually believe that that's the truth, that a trans woman is a woman, and therefore you can't use that pronoun?
No, that's not my argument at all. Yeah, really. My argument is that the government shouldn't compel voluntary speech.
No, but I know what your argument is. And you've made it very clearly.
But that's exactly it.
But the motivation behind it. But you don't believe
I wouldn't put everything on my online in my life to take the stance I did unless I had thought that through very deeply. And I've thought it through very deeply. There aren't hidden motivations that have to do with some arbitrary prejudice against trans people.
Okay.
It's purely and simply this. There's never been a time in English common law history where the government compelled speech, and the Canadian government dared to do that. And that was unacceptable.
Unacceptable.
I
want to give him the benefit of the doubt at the beginning there. She asked him if trans women are women, and he said no. But then later he says, what does real mean? Implying that maybe he thought she said real women, which I'm not sure. Yeah. But if he said that somewhere else, then that goes out the window. But
I mean, this whole argument
is exactly what Ben Shapiro says. This is exactly what Ben Shapiro says.
This is all just definitions, right?
No, it's not.
It's not? Okay. Because
this is
the definition of until 10 years ago, the definition of woman that I use, that everybody I know used, meant somebody that was born a woman, somebody that was born with a vagina, a trans person, which I was barely even aware of until, probably well out of high school. Something you kind of heard about, I kind of knew who RuPaul was, and that was my understanding of it. And so the transgender movement comes along, and then these definitions get expanded on, and they get split. And okay, now we have sex and gender, and like I'm happy to hear the arguments for these new definitions and take them into account. And I certainly don't want anybody to feel bad. I certainly don't want anybody to be oppressed. But that's what it is. That's what I feel like it is. We're just talking definitions. What is a woman? Well, my understanding of what a woman is, just like most people's, is somebody that was born a woman, somebody that has vagina, that probably could have children at one point, was capable of getting pregnant. That's a woman. So
that was someone who was born as a woman.
Yeah, someone that was born as a woman, yes.
Well, she's not necessarily still a woman. You can change your gender identity. Definitions expand and change over time all across the English language. I mean,
sure. And
Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro's refusal to accept the changing definition is defensible.
Okay, but that's what we're saying, is that the definition is probably changing, but it's kind of just,
So what does it say about Peterson that he refuses to acknowledge gender identity as a thing? It's a thing that's well known. It's in the medical science. He refuses to acknowledge it, like Ben Shapiro refuses to acknowledge it. I don't believe in gender identity. I don't even bring it up or talk about it because I don't know.
I would have to hear specifically what he's saying about it. I think there's a lot of nuance around that on accepting what a person says. I mean, obviously these things exist. There was a great, really good debate. I think I brought it up on here between Neil deGrasse Tyson and Ben Shapiro, of all people. And Neil deGrasse Tyson just really laid it out. Like, okay, whether you think it's real or not, this is certainly something that people are feeling. And and if you agree that that is the case, that people feel like that they are a woman, they feel like they're a man, they feel like they are something other than what we would traditionally characterize them as, then that is science, and that's something that needs to be researched. But
like, if you look at the WHO, there is a specific definition for gender identity, and there's a specific definition for gender. There is a difference. Yeah. And the refusal to acknowledge the fact that gender identity exists is it's like closing your eyes and saying, blah, blah, I don't hear you, and making a completely different argument.
No, so I think there would be, first off, how long is that?
There's no difference between men and women. That's completely beside the point, right?
Yeah, that's completely beside the point. That's got nothing to do with anything.
Nobody says that ever, I don't think. That's silly.
No, No, this is classic Peterson straw manning, where he heard somebody online, somebody on Twitter replied to him and said there's no definition, no difference between them, and so now he's gonna equate that as anybody that argues against him on the trans issue. That's the position they're taking.
Right.
So that's kind of the fundamental dishonesty of Peterson.
Because he can't argue against. He can't argue against it on a scientific. He has no basis to argue against it, and he has to appeal to those people that he's trying to appeal to, and this is the way he does it, right? Here's a bit on feminism. This is Jordan Peterson's take on feminism. This I hate holding it. I mean, you have to hold a public figure to what they say, right? You can't just let them off the hook every time.
The basic marital routine was to ride into the village and grab the bride and run away with her on a horse, right? It's like the motorcycle gang member who rips the two naive women out. So I kind of wonder if part of the reason that modern university-age women aren't so angry is because that fundamental feminine role is actually being denied to them.
I think. So I'm not sure if he caught that all.
So
women are angry because the fundamental role of being sexually assaulted is being denied to them. They want to be kidnapped and raped.
I'm pretty sure that's not what he was saying, but I would be interested to know, what he was talking about. There really wasn't a whole lot to go on.
He's talking about hierarchies, the hierarchy of men above women. It's immutable.
Yeah,
you can't mess with it.
I'm pretty sure that's not what he was saying, but
he's defended this anti-feminist position many times. He argues against the gender pay gap. He tries to pretend like it doesn't exist.
Yeah. I would be with Peterson on that one, by the way.
Oh, you think the gender pay gap doesn't exist, huh?
There is a gap that exists between genders in pay that exists, yes, but is that gap a result of a patriarchal oppression of women? No, it's not. I mean, it's a result of sexism dating back since before the 50s, because women were meant to stay home and take care of the kids, and men were meant to go work, right? I don't think it's sexism. I think it's a natural outcropping of just biology of how we're kind of wired to take care of children and how the family unit works.
Well, that's the sexist.
I don't see what the heck.
Your point of view is that women need to be at home with the kids, and they're not allowed in the workforce.
My point of view is that women bear the children. Women need a recuperative period after bearing children. That women lactate. That women tend to be more nurturing. I mean, just as I think that women tend to be a lot more tolerant. Yeah. So in general,
but that shouldn't inform social policy, should it?
Well, I don't. Does it have to do with social policies? I mean, it just happens to be that women tend to be the ones to take care of children more often than men, whereas men go out. It's a good question. I mean, there's biological reasons for. I was just talking about why. They tend to be more nurturing. They tend to be. There are biological reasons that they have to be there in early life, and
right.
So I don't think, is that something that's imposed on them having to nurse their children?
Somebody has to raise the kids in society, don't they?
Yeah.
So it's just the fact that women don't make as much as men is it's immutable. It's a hierarchy that has to exist.
It's the fact that women women don't take overtime as much. I mean, that's a big part of it. Women don't put in all the extra hours. I mean, that's kind of what most of it comes from. Now, is that something that's imposed on women, or is it just a simple fact of, I mean, this gets a lot into what Peterson talks about too, where it's a lot of just personality differences between men and women, and you see it expressed.
I disagree.
Through things like pay. Men are more aggressive, for example. Men are more willing to
men have
put everything
more time
on the line.
to work because they don't have to raise the kids.
Who's going to raise the kids? Who's going to raise them?
So you're saying you don't think raising children should be paid work? You don't think society has an obligation to raise our kids collectively?
I think there's a certain obligation that we have towards parents. I'm happy with. I think we should have more paid maternity leave, more on the European model of paid maternity leave. I think that we do a lot to help people raise kids. There's WIC programs, which are like the SNAP programs. We're starting to move into more pay for Head Start programs and where they watch your kids at before school. I don't know what that program's called. Daycare.
Daycare is extremely expensive.
Yeah, I don't know.
It costs more. It would cost me more to put the kids in daycare than to go get a job. For entry level work.
Okay, I never dealt with that. I would be happy to start giving out vouchers for that. If you qualify for certain food stamps, then you would get a voucher for daycare.
As someone who has raised 2 kids, I can tell you it's a full-time job. For one. For two, raising kids should be paid work. If the government were to pay women to raise the kids, then I wouldn't have an issue with the gender pay gap, because then that gap would be met. It would be evened out, right?
Mm-hmm.
If raising kids was paid work in this country, which it's not, which is why there's a disparity between men and women. Because women have to raise the kids, and that's not paid work in this country. It's on the women to raise the fucking kids. Historically, it's getting better, but I understand there's WIC programs, but that's not the same thing as paying to raise the kid.
I don't know. I would have to hear some really good arguments for something like that. Is there any place that does? What about the individual's responsibility to raise their own children? Shouldn't they take,
So it should be split evenly between men and women, right?
Well, I'm saying the family in and of itself. What responsibility do they have if they have to be paid to sit there to take care of their own children? That seems a little crazy.
Somebody has to raise the kid, and somebody gets to go work. The woman can't go work to make enough money to even out the pay gap.
Yeah,
you have to stay home with the kid, right? There's a difference there. There is a gap.
Yeah. There is a gap there, but whether it's as a result of sexism and being imposed on,
what else would it be a result of? Just laziness on the part of women?
It is just a simple fact that they are not going out and working to the same degree that men do on average. And they're also.
What do you mean by to the same degree?
Well, hours. That's essentially what it is.
Exactly.
They're not going out and working the same amount of hours, and
not able to.
Yeah, they're not able to because they had kids.
Because they're damn women, right? The men have kids too, but they still go get to work.
Yeah, because men are more suited towards going out and doing things like that, whereas women are generally more suited towards being nurturing and taking care of kids, whereas men are more suited to go out and be more aggressive. And
I have to disagree with that take. Even if genetically you're right, I think societally it's wrong to organize.
Is there any place where they just pay you full-time job to take care of your own kids?
Yeah, there are stipends. I'm not sure exactly what.
I've got no problem with stipends. I've got no problem with vouchers for daycare.
So you don't think raising kids should be paid work, is what you're saying?
No, I don't. Hell no.
Interesting. So you're a big time proponent of child support, I would hope.
I am. I've been paying it for 14 years.
You love it, don't you?
Wouldn't
you rather the state paid her instead of you?
What's that?
Wouldn't you rather the state paid her instead of you?
No, because I have a responsibility to her. No, because I have a responsibility to my child. It's my responsibility to my child. Now, I think that the community also has a responsibility towards helping raise children, and I think we fulfill that responsibility mostly by providing with WIC, child care, earned income credits, tax credits.
Well, that earned income credit is the child tax credit. That's what
that is, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what it is.
It's just nowhere near what it needs to be, in my opinion.
No, I'd be happy with raising all those things, raising the eligibility, raising the amounts that are paid out, but just full stop paying. Getting a weekly check to raise your kids out of that.
The child tax credit is extremely beneficial to children with family, to families with children.
Oh, I have never gotten it. I've always been on the paying end, but.
Well, you're lucky you get to go work, man. You can have a career and whatnot.
I am.
Pretty tough to do that when you're a single mother.
It certainly is.
As we both know,
Yeah, it certainly is, and there needs to be a lot more help for single mothers, for sure.
Quality of outcome. This is another Peterson straw man. Anyone who advocates for equal rights of any type are advocating for equality of outcome. Didn't you know? This is something that not even extreme orthodox Marxists advocate for. This is a parody out of a sci-fi book like The Giver. I don't know if you've read The Giver, but
I did. It's been a long time.
Been a while, huh?
Been a while.
It's like, okay, so you're a young man,
Mm-hmm.
and all the women are rejecting you. Who's got the problem? It's not all the women. That's
Right.
a bad road to go down. If all the women are rejecting you, it's you.
We both agree on this, but why is enforced monogamy the solution for people that are involuntary celibates?
Well, it's the solution to the relationship between men and women. Fundamentally, is monogamous social
but these
norms.
men are unattractive. If these men
well,
are
the
unattractive,
solution to them.
but if these men are unattractive to women, I don't mean just physically unattractive. I mean women aren't seeking them as mates.
Mhm.
They need to become men.
Yes, they certainly do.
This is
That's
what it
the
is.
solution.
That's the solution.
Absolutely.
And we
man.
both agree on this. So,
Yes,
but,
but they need to do that in a society where monogamy is the social norm.
But isn't
That's
it
all.
the social norm anyway?
Well, that was partly my point, although to the degree that we deviate from that, we tilt towards a more violent society. I was making a very minor point.
I don't think they're related, quite honestly. I don't think that involuntary celibates, I don't think that having enforced monogamy as a part of our cultural norm is going to help those people. I really don't.
It does.
How's it going to help them?
Well, because what happens is if a polygamous society develops, which is the alternative, then a small minority of men get all
It's
the
not
women.
the alternative.
That's
There's
what
a lot of
happens.
degrees in there.
Enforced monogamy is the solution to the relationship between men and women.
Yeah, and there's either enforced monogamy or there's polygamous societies. It's the only two. There's only 2 points on that line. There's no gradations in between there. Yeah, this is where Peterson just gets silly. I think we have a good balance. I think monogamy is being the kind of, I guess, the desirable means of creating a family or becoming part of society is fine. To the degree that it doesn't exist, I think it's also fine. I don't think we as a society need much help there. And I don't know what this would have to do with incels and how you would curb aggression, young male aggression by.
Well,
I don't know. I'm not.
He's arguing here for a social framework to enforce monogamy. He wants a social framework to level the playing field among men with regards to getting a mate. Without that social framework, a few men at the very top would get all the women and leave the rest behind. In other words, Peterson wants equality of outcome, only for men though, to get women. That's when he advocates for equality of outcome, because the free market of getting mates just isn't. It's not appropriate in his mind. This is him trying to advocate for quote unquote family values, but accidentally shitting on his own philosophy.
Yeah, I don't think this is very well thought out on his end.
Yeah.
Also, if we as a society are going to start enforcing monogamy like that, like how is that any different or better than if they did start enforcing the gender pronouns? Like that seems enforcing monogamy seems way more intrusive than just saying, hey, you have to call this person a she.
Right.
I'll call you whatever. It makes no difference to me, but yeah.
I figured out how to monetize social justice warriors.
Yes, he did. That's exactly what he did. He did it very well. Unfortunately for Peterson, he has some skeletons in his closet, apparently.
Don't we all?
We do indeed. Here's Peterson's daughter, who's joined in on the grift.
Hi everyone. It's been months since we've given an update on Jordan or my family's health, and it's time for one, so here it is. The last year has been extremely difficult for our family. Dad was put on a low dose of a benzodiazepine a few years ago for anxiety following an extremely severe autoimmune reaction to food. He took the medication as prescribed. Last April, when my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer, the dose of the medication was increased. It became apparent that he was suffering from both a physical dependency and a paradoxical reaction to the medication. A paradoxical reaction means the drugs do the opposite of what they're supposed to. These reactions are rare but not unheard of. For the last 8 months, he's been in unbearable discomfort from this drug, made worse when trying to remove it because of the addition of withdrawal symptoms stemming from physical dependence. He experienced terrible akathisia, which is a condition where the person feels an incredible endless, irresistible restlessness bordering on panic, and an inability to sit still. The reaction made him suicidal. After several failed treatment attempts in North American hospitals, including attempts at tapering and micro-tapering, we had to seek an emergency medical benzodiazepine detox, which we were only able to find in Russia. It was incredibly grueling and was further complicated by severe pneumonia, which we've been told he developed in one of the previous hospitals. He's had to spend 4 weeks in the ICU in terrible shape, but with the help of some extremely competent and courageous doctors, he survived. The decision to bring him to Russia was made in extreme desperation when we couldn't find any better option. The uncertainty around his recovery has been one of the most difficult and scary experiences we've ever had. So, finally, Dad is on the mend, even though there's a lot of physiological damage that he needs to recover from. He's improving and is off of the horrible medication. His sense of humor is back, he's smiling again for the first time in months, but he still has a long way to go to recover fully.
So Jordan Peterson went to rehab for benzodiazepine addiction because he took benzos due to his extreme food allergy. Right. This guy has a lot of problems. Not only that, but he also has paradoxical reactions to the medication all of a sudden.
Yeah.
He has a lot of issues, man. He has a lot of medical issues.
Yeah, well,
can't eat nothing but meat.
Thankfully, he had all that money to go to Russia and didn't have to detox on the street like most people do.
Dude, I'm sure they gave him some good stuff in Russia, whatever he wanted, could afford.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
why did he need to go to Russia? I know there were stories about that.
Yeah, well, they put him in my understanding was they put him in a medically induced coma so that he could detox in a...
What a pussy.
They detox him in a coma, yeah.
Oh, what a pussy.
That's what they'll do that here in the U.S. My uncle went through that for alcoholism here in the U.S.
Interesting.
But I guess they just don't do it for benzo withdrawal. Or I also understand he was not taking that many benzos. He didn't have I think he's kind of a pussy. He's kind of a pussy. He might have been taking like a milligram or 2 a day.
If I could I
gotta go to Russia.
If any time I had to go through withdrawals, I would just be in a coma. I wouldn't give a shit, dude. I'd be shooting up right now. Hell.
Yeah.
Put me in a coma. Get it over with.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna go buck wild for like 6 months and then fly me out, put me in a coma for a couple of weeks, and then I'll be good to go. Yeah.
It was just ironic to me, his whole personal responsibility shtick.
Keep your room clean, stand up straight, take care of your own stuff. I mean, this is kind of like
don't be out there taking benzos, guys.
I mean, this is something else that drove me crazy. We didn't really cover, but his response to leftists trying to bring about social, political, economic change. Well, look at your own life first. Before you want to tell us to start, enforcing labor laws on for these workers over here. What did you do this morning? Did you eat breakfast well? Did you eat junk food for breakfast?
Did you make your bed?
Did you make your bed? You've got no right to complain.
Excuse me, Antifa.
You've got no right to complain about getting paid $7 an hour if you didn't make your bed this morning. Come on, get the fuck out of here.